A noble elven maiden was mysteriously pinned to the wall, her lower half missing, with countless vines spreading from her abdomen. Several human corpses, burnt to a crisp by intense heat, lay scattered on the ground. Even more bizarrely, the elven maiden wasn't completely dead. It turned out that during a sacrificial ceremony, humans suddenly attacked, and in the chaos, she was struck by a magical staff from one of her own kind, leaving her in this grotesque state. This story takes place on a planet where humans, elves, and orcs coexist. 2,000 years ago, the three races banded together to overthrow the demon lord's rule, bringing about the current era of peace. However, over time, tensions began to rise between the three races. A faction of dark elves, known as the Hell Party, planned to resurrect the demon lord using the power of a magical staff. The seemingly peaceful world was on the brink of hellish destruction, but Daryl had more immediate concerns to deal with.
That's it right there. Now take the little homie out LAPD style like you do.
I do him like that.
Daryl was a patrol officer who had been recovering at home for 3 months after being struck by an orc during a call. That day, Daryl's partner, Nick, came to pick him up for work, but the moment Daryl saw the orc, his anger flared. The orc robber who had injured him still hadn't been found, so after venting his frustration, Daryl reluctantly got into Nick's car to return to the station. When Daryl returned to work, his colleagues didn't celebrate his recovery. Instead, they came one by one to complain about his orc partner. Nick was the only orc police officer in the city, and as a result, he faced endless ostracism. Even the investigators approached Daryl, suspecting that Nick had let the criminal escape. On the day of the incident, the suspect had fled into a dead-end alley. The only possible escape route was a ladder 5 meters high. Even an orc in peak physical condition couldn't have escaped alone. They gave Daryl a recorder, saying that if he recorded Nick's confession, he could get him kicked off the force. Initially, Daryl refused, but they threatened that one of them had to go, leaving Daryl to make the choice. Daryl's first assignment after returning to duty was to deal with a shirtless homeless man. The man was waving a rusty iron sword in the street, shouting about the dark god, claiming that the demon lord's land would soon return, and that the world belonged to dark magic. However, as soon as he saw Daryl and Nick pull out their guns, he immediately backed down. On the way back to the police station, he begins to speak gibberish in the language of the orcs, relating to an old legend about the spirits of light, and saying that Daryl is a man protected by the gods. After hearing this, Nick panicked and almost crashed into an oncoming car. It seemed that Nick and Daryl's identities were far from simple. That night, just as the two were about to finish their shift, they received a call from the command center about a shooting nearby. When they arrived at the scene, the sight before them was chilling. Bodies burned to ashes by magic were scattered everywhere. They continued searching inside the building, and soon they were stunned into silence by what they saw next. A grotesque elf was pinned to the wall, blood staining the walls, her lower half missing, with countless energy vines spreading from her abdomen. As the two of them stood in shock, a shadow suddenly darted from behind, and Daryl immediately gave chase. The elven woman was incredibly agile, but just as they caught up with her, Daryl accidentally touched the staff she was holding, scaring both of them. After some questioning, the female elf Tika also told the reason. This is a wand that can fulfill any wish of human beings, and is also one of the 4 wands to awaken the Hell Demon King, but the premise is that only 1 in 10,000 light spirits can use it, and the general public will immediately go up in smoke as soon as they touch it. Soon, their colleagues arrived at the scene, their eyes filled with greed as they gazed at the staff, as if it held an irresistible allure. Although everyone wants to get the wand to fulfill their wishes, only Brights can use it, and anyone else will be killed on the spot, and Brights are 1 in a million. At this point he puts the wand in his bag with gloves on and agrees with a couple of co-workers to try to keep the wand for himself, while tracing the loss of the wand back to Nick. Since Nick is an orc, everyone will believe it and also hold Daryl's family hostage, and will retaliate against Daryl's wife and son if they don't kill Nick and Tika. Reluctantly, Daryl agreed. Just as he raised his gun, he asked Nick the question that had been weighing on his mind.
I gave you plenty of time to talk about this shit. Karma is a bitch, and here it comes. I let him go.
It turned out that Nick had lost sight of his target in the alley and had found an orc child there. That's why he had let the child go. Meanwhile, the officers inside, not hearing any gunshots, came out to check.
So this is where off the walls gone, my
Nick, clueless about the situation, was completely confused. At this point there are a lot of people coming around, who turn out to be gangsters trying to use the power of the wand to restore their cancerous physiques. Luckily, their car was fast, and with its bulletproof glass, they quickly escaped the neighborhood. But the crime boss wasn't far behind. After an intense car chase, Daryl and the others managed to shake off the crime boss, thanks to the police car's enhancements. Just when they thought they had escaped safely, Tika, sitting in the back seat, suddenly became agitated, warning them of danger ahead. The trio are chased by the mob to the basement and discover that it turns out the genie is not the owner of the wand. The staff would form a barrier to prevent others from controlling it once it left its owner. As they were learning this from Tika, the crime boss's men found them. In the ensuing chaos, the staff fell to the ground. A clueless henchman tried to pick it up, but the staff, sensing a foreign presence, instantly triggered a powerful explosion, turning the henchman to dust. As Daryl and the others fought off the crime boss's men, the Dark Elves arrived. They were swift and ruthless, taking down over a dozen gang members in mere seconds. Daryl and the others took advantage of the chaos to slip out the back door. Just as they left, armed police arrived at the scene and encountered the Dark Elves, who attacked before the police could react. Facing enemies from all sides, Daryl had no choice but to seek help from the FBI. But no matter what he said, they didn't believe him. To make matters worse, their phone had been tapped by the Dark Elves, who quickly tracked Daryl and his group to a gas station using the phone's location. Under heavy fire, Daryl could only hide behind the shelves, too afraid to show himself. Seeing the group closing in step by step, Daryl quickly shot a bottle of lighter fluid on the shelf in a moment of desperation. Using the explosion as cover, the three barely escaped with their lives, only to stumble into Orc territory. Nick, already facing discrimination as an Orc police officer, now received another brutal beating. The three of them, battered and bruised, were brought before the Orc leader, who was also after the staff. After enduring torture, the three of them said nothing. Just as Dorger decides to kill the three men, Dorger's son recognizes Nick, the cop who saved his life in the last shooting. But Dorger doesn't go soft on him for being his son's savior and shoots Nick through the heart. As the gun was about to be turned on Daryl, Tika suddenly shouted and pulled up the staff hidden on her body, instantly unleashing a powerful burst of magic. Everyone was stunned by the scene before them, as Tika began chanting over Nick's body. As her magic grew stronger, Nick's body floated into the air. In the next moment, to everyone's horror, Nick was revived. In the Orc tribe, there was a prophecy that the first person protected by a bright would be respected by all Orcs. Though the trio is free again, Tika suffers a backlash from her wand in an attempt to revive Nick, and must be immersed in a pool of water under the sacred tree before dawn or die a violent death. But they hadn't expected the Dark Elves of the Hell Party to have already laid an ambush. Though Daryl held a weapon, the Dark Elves were too agile, far beyond his ability to handle. Thankfully, Nick stepped in just in time, taking down the elf. Using his Orcish strength, he endured her attacks, and as he knocked her back, he managed to tie a remote bomb to her. The explosion attracted the attention of Layla, the Dark Elf leader, who then engaged in battle with Daryl. Meanwhile, Nick also fought fiercely, though he was knocked down. Daryl, on the other hand, managed to tie Layla up with electrical wires, temporarily restricting her movement. The three finally reached the sacred tree, and just as they placed Tika in the pool, Layla's body began to heal. As the three let their guard down, Layla suddenly reappeared. After dealing with Nick, She used her power to pull the staff toward her and yanked both Tika and Daryl out of the pool. Layla intended to use Tika's body as a sacrifice to summon the Demon Lord, completely unaware that Nick had broken free. Nick shot Layla's hand, causing her to drop the staff. Daryl complained that Nick should have aimed for her head, but as Nick went to fire a second shot, he ran out of bullets. Meanwhile, Layla's shattered hand began to heal at an astonishing speed. Daryl then made a bold decision. He planned to pick up the staff with his mortal body and take Layla down with him, but strangely, when Daryl picked up the staff, he didn't explode. Instead, the blue staff turned red. Everyone was stunned by what they saw. Realizing the situation, Tika quickly shouted a spell. With a loud bang, Daryl completely destroyed Layla and the Hell Party. Afterward, the staff was sealed away by the FBI using a special device. In the end, Daryl and Nick not only earned the respect of the other races, but were also awarded the highest honors. The movie ends here. If you liked it, don't forget to like and bookmark. See you next time.